Imagine a biker, out to prove his power, rips off a woman's shirt in front of an entire bar. What happens next is something no one expected. Her tattoo, her story, and the power of silence stopped the whole room cold. Stay with me, because this story is about to flip everything you thought you knew about strength and courage. If you're part of the Black Visionaries family, hit that like button right now and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The night was ordinary at first, just another typical evening in a small town where the local bar was filled with the sounds of motorcycles rumbling down the streets, engines revving, and the hum of chatter rising from every corner of the room. Inside, the usual crowd was gathered, bikers looking to wind down after a long day, their laughter loud and carefree, beer bottles clinking with every joke shared. But there was something different about tonight. A woman walked in, and everything seemed to pause, even if only for a moment. Her name was Tasha, and she wasn't like anyone who typically wandered into this particular bar. She wasn't here to blend in or seek validation. She was here to be herself, unapologetically. The moment she stepped through the door, heads turned. Tasha wasn't tall, but she had a presence that made her seem larger than life. The energy in the room shifted, and though no one said it, there was an unspoken understanding that something was about to change. The bar's regulars, a group of bikers, couldn't help but notice. They were rough, they were loud, and they were used to getting attention, but the energy around Tasha was different. She wasn't looking for anyone's approval, and that intrigued them. Among the bikers, one man, in particular, caught sight of her. His name was Rick, and his reputation preceded him. He was the kind of guy who always found a way to make himself the center of attention, regardless of the situation. And tonight, he had set his sights on Tasha. Rick was confident, maybe even overconfident. He was known for pushing boundaries, for saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, and somehow getting away with it. But tonight, he miscalculated. As he swaggered over to Tasha with a grin on his face, he thought this would be just another easy win, an easy flirt, a few laughs, maybe even a date. But Tasha wasn't interested. She didn't care about his advances, his bravado, or his charm, and that seemed to rattle him. Tasha, not wanting to get involved in a conversation that had no place in her night, turned her attention to the bartender. But Rick wasn't going to give up that easily. He wasn't used to being ignored. His pride took a hit, and with that, his temper flared. He leaned in closer, trying to force her into a conversation she clearly didn't want. He made a crude remark, hoping for a reaction, any reaction. But Tasha stayed calm, her face unreadable, simply refusing to engage. Rick's smirk turned into a sneer as he grew more frustrated. He was used to women giving in to his charm, his strength. But Tasha wasn't just any woman, and she wasn't intimidated by him. That's when he crossed the line. In a fit of irritation, without thinking about the consequences, Rick yanked at her shirt, ripping it off her body. The entire bar went silent. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Gasps filled the air as people stared, unsure of how to react. Rick stood there, triumphant for only a second, thinking he had gained control of the situation. But he was wrong. As Tasha stood there, her back to the room, the crowd was taken aback by what they saw. Beneath the torn shirt, she had a tattoo. But this was no ordinary tattoo. It wasn't some decorative design or a fleeting trend. It was massive, an intricate piece that spanned most of her back. A phoenix, wings spread wide, flames trailing behind it as it rose from the ashes. It wasn't just a beautiful piece of art. It was a symbol of everything Tasha had overcome, a reminder of the battles she had fought, the hardships she had endured, and the strength she had gained in the process. For a moment, no one moved. The bar, once filled with chatter and noise, was now deathly quiet. Rick stood frozen, his hand still outstretched, unable to process what had just happened. This wasn't the scene he had expected. He had imagined Tasha flailing, angry, or humiliated, but instead, she stood tall, her eyes calm and unwavering. The tattoo was a testament to who she was, a visible declaration of her power and resilience. The silence in the room grew thicker, heavier, as everyone tried to make sense of what they had just witnessed. People turned their attention to the tattoo, as if it had cast some sort of spell over them. It wasn't just ink, it was a story, a powerful narrative written on her skin. And in that moment, It spoke louder than any words could. Rick, for the first time, found himself at a loss for words. The bravado that had driven him to make his move was gone. He had expected to see anger, fear, maybe even tears. But instead, he was confronted with a quiet strength, a force that he couldn't understand. He had miscalculated. He thought he had power in that moment, but he didn't. Tasha turned to face him, her eyes locked onto his. She didn't yell. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stared at him, her gaze unwavering. And with that, something incredible happened. Rick, the man who was used to getting whatever he wanted, couldn't help but feel small. He had expected a reaction, a fight, a confrontation, but instead, he was met with something more powerful than he could have imagined. Still without saying a word, Tasha reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She held it in front of Rick, showing him a picture of her tattoo. It was a close-up, capturing every detail of the phoenix, every swirl of flame, every inch of the design. And beneath the picture was a quote in bold letters. "Strength comes from within, and no one can take that from you." Rick's eyes shifted from the screen to Tasha's face, trying to make sense of it. What was she trying to say? Was she mocking him? No, this wasn't mockery. This was a challenge. It was a reminder. No matter how much he tried to control the situation, Tasha was in control of her own story, her own power, and nothing he did could take that away. The bar, which had been holding its breath, slowly began to exhale. The tension in the room shifted, and suddenly, the tables were turned. Rick no longer stood at the center of attention. It was Tasha who commanded the room now. The men around the bar, who had once been wary of her, now looked at her with respect. They saw her strength. They saw her dignity. And they knew, in that moment, that this wasn't a woman to be messed with. Rick, defeated and unsure of what to do, turned and walked out of the bar, his friends following behind him. No one said a word as they left, but the message was clear. Tasha had won. She had turned the tide without raising a fist, without shouting, without giving in to aggression. She had shown that true power comes from within, from knowing who you are and standing firm in your beliefs. The bartender, who had been watching the entire scene unfold, nodded at Tasha with a silent acknowledgement. He didn't need to say anything. She had already proven everything that needed to be proven. She wasn't just a woman with a tattoo. She was a woman who had lived, who had fought, and who had emerged victorious in the battle of inner strength. Tasha smiled quietly and declined the drink the bartender offered her. She didn't need anything from anyone. She had everything she needed in that moment: her own power, her own peace, and the respect of everyone in the room. The tattoo wasn't just a piece of art. It was a reminder that nothing in this world could take away her strength, her dignity, or her spirit. And the bar, the people in it, would never be the same again. Before you go, make sure you subscribe right now and join the Black Visionaries family, because we're building a movement of stories that open eyes, touch hearts, and change lives. Until next, Tim.